Over the history of the NFL, we've seen many players come and go. Pro Bowlers, All-Pros, and legends of the game all eventually have their story come to an end. But what's the difference between a final season getting this reaction and another final season getting this reaction? Tom Brady's the greatest player of all time. For nearly 2 decades, we all watched his journey from arguably the worst combine ever to being picked in the 6th round to back up into dominating the NFL with all his MVPs, records, and of course, Super Bowls. He had gone from the Patriots dynasty ending on a pick 6 to his first season with a new team in Tampa Bay in 2020 ending in a championship win. And it seemed as though that would be the storybook ending. It happened with Peyton and with Elway, both whom we'll get to later, so it made sense it also would happen with Brady. However, Brady was on a quest of his own. For years he had said he wanted to play until he was 45, and because of that, he'd actually signed an extension with the team to play through 2022 and his 45th birthday. And so he'd come back in 2021, somehow even better. At 43 years old, Brady led the NFL in both passing yards with 5,316 and touchdown passes with 43. The first Buccaneer to ever win the touchdown crown. He posted a 102.1 passer rating while throwing to a record 90 different receivers in his career. He finished second in MVP voting, and the Bucs rolled through the regular season, including beating his former team New England Patriots in Week 4, then clapping their first round matchup against the Eagles. But their championship defense ended in the divisional round, despite Brady's valiant effort to almost mount a full comeback from being down 27-3 in the third. They fell just short of a comeback against the Rams, ending their repeat hopes. And again, it seems as though he might hang it up after that with nothing left to prove. But Brady had 45 in his sights. This is where things get odd. Adam Schefter would report Tom Brady's retiring from football after 22 extraordinary seasons, but just 40 days later, Brady reversed course, announcing his return with unfinished business. What followed was one of the most turbulent years of his career. In October, his 13-year marriage ended. His offensive line crumbled to injuries once the season started, losing Pro Bowl center Ryan Jensen before the season even began. Gronk retired again, this time for good. And despite the chaos, Brady still threw for 4,694 yards with the 25-9 TD to INT ratio. But you could tell he was getting old. He wouldn't stay in the pocket for nearly as long, and he just looked a bit slower. And for the first time in 23 years, he finished with a losing record at 8-9 after the Falcons, of all teams, handed him his final regular season loss. After that, Brady would retire for good. His last season was just weird. We didn't know if he was going to play, then he looked not very good, and then he officially announced his retirement on the beach, but nobody knew for sure. Obviously, he's the greatest player we've ever seen, and most were just happy to see him play out his career, just a little bit longer. But for literally the greatest player of all time, it was an odd final season. And it was an odd final season for his teammate, Antonio Brown, as well, but for very different reasons. Antonio Brown was one of, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL during his peak from 2013 to 2018. He made 6 Pro Bowls and 4 straight first-team All-Pros. Then he was traded to the Raiders and everything broke. Showing up in helicopters, freezing his feet, making excuses about helmets. It was so weird. Then he was released by the Raiders before even playing a snap. AB would eventually work his way to play with Tom Brady first in 2019 with the Patriots, but he was released after multiple allegations coming out. The Bucs would then pick him up for the 2020 season. Despite only playing 8 games, Brown showed he still had it. He caught 45 passes for 483 yards and 4 touchdowns, showing flashes of the all-pro receiver we once saw. More importantly, he stayed out of trouble. The gamble paid off when Brown caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl, earning a championship ring. Coming into 2021, there was optimism. Brown had redeemed himself, but cracks began to show. He missed time with an ankle injury that plagued him since Week 6. When he returned for Week 17 against the Jets, everything fell apart. According to reports, Brown was benched by Arians during the game. When the coach tried to get him back in, Brown refused twice. That's when Arians told him to leave. What happened next shocked everyone. Brown ripped off his jersey and pads on the sideline, threw his shirt and gloves into the crowd, then ran shirtless across the end zone, waving to fans before disappearing into the tunnel. Arians was blunt after the game. He's no longer a Buck. Brown later claimed he was forced to play injured, but the damage was done. His NFL career ended with not glory, but chaos. And I doubt he makes the Hall of Fame now, when he seemed like a lock 5 years ago. He was looked at as the best wide receiver of the 2010s and is still probably seen as that, but after literally quitting on his team and walking off the field with each allegation and arrest that passes, makes it tougher and tougher to root for him and his Hall of Fame case. Another Hall of Fame bubble player whose career ended in chaos was Earl Thomas. But the seeds really started to show in 2018. Frustrated without receiving a new contract, Earl Thomas would play just 4 games before snapping his leg, flipping off his coach and sideline while being carted back to the locker room. Earl before this moment was a 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro, and was a pillar on the Legion of Boom. But after that broken leg, things changed fast. The Ravens signed him to a massive 4-year, $55 million deal in 2019, the largest contract ever given to a defensive player in franchise history. At 30 years old, Thomas made the Pro Bowl in his only season in Baltimore, recording 49 tackles and 2 interceptions. But in the playoffs, he got absolutely embarrassed when Derrick Henry stiff-armed him into oblivion during their divisional round loss to the Titans. Then 2020 became a complete disaster. In April, police reported to call about 3 women with guns at an Austin rental home. Thomas's wife Nina had tracked him through Snapchat and allegedly found him with another woman and his brother. But that wasn't even the end of his career. During training camp in August, Thomas got into a heated argument with teammate Chuck Clark after blowing a coverage. Clark ripped off his helmet and threw it to the ground. Thomas responded by punching him. Clark was a team captain and beloved by his teammates at the time. It was the final straw after reportedly missing meetings and other incidents. The Ravens released him immediately. Another legend who I'm not sure is going to make the Hall and is now in a weird spot. He's beloved by Seahawks fans, not as much by the front office, and is hated in Baltimore. A crazy legacy for a former Lock Hall of Famer. Someone definitely making the Hall though is Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly didn't have any scandals or anything crazy happen off the field, but this was one of the saddest retirements in the past decade. Kuechly was an 8-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first-team All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year, and was a lock for a Hall of Fame. He was arguably the smartest person in football and was beloved by players and fans alike. There was only one knock with him, and it wasn't even his fault: concussions. From 2015 to 2017, Kuechly missed 7 games due to concussions. The most haunting image came in 2016 when he was carted off the field on Thursday Night Football, tears streaming down his face. He even wore an experimental device called the Q collar around his neck for 3 seasons designed to reduce concussion risk. But in 2019, at just 28 years old, Kuechly had another dominant season. He made another Pro Bowl, recording 144 combined tackles, leading the team once again. He added 2 interceptions, 12 pass deflections, and even forced a safety. He was still elite, yet something felt different. In a tearful video on January 14, 2020, Kuechly announced his retirement. "There's only one way to play this game since I was a little kid. Play fast, play physical, play strong," he said, fighting back emotions. And at this point, I don't know if I'm able to do that anymore. Kuechly walked away on his own terms, choosing health over glory. No scandals, no drama, just a legend who knew when to say goodbye. Not all his fans have still fully recovered from his retirement, and the Panthers are just now starting to come out of that hole as well. He was one of the best we'll ever see, and he'll be in the Hall soon enough. Speaking of Hall of Fame, we gotta mention John Elway's final season. John Elway was one of the best QBs of the 80s and 90s, behind Joe Montana and 1983 draftmate Dan Marino, a player who we'll get to a little bit later. He had won an MVP, made 3 Super Bowls, and made 7 Pro Bowls before his 1997 season. He came second in MVP voting in 1996 at age 36. They were heavy favorites to at least make it to the Super Bowl. Instead, they were bounced by the year 2 Jacksonville Jags. It seemed as though Elway would be known as a guy who could never win the big one. Embarrassed and old, it seemed as though Elway might have retired without a ring, but he and his team all wanted revenge. And revenge is exactly what they got. The 1997 Broncos went 12-4 with Elway throwing for 3,635 passing yards and 27 TDs. They steamrolled through the playoffs, setting up a Super Bowl matchup against the defending champion Packers, the team everyone expected to repeat. In that Super Bowl, Elway delivered the defining moment of his career. On a crucial 3rd down, the 37-year-old scrambled and launched himself into a helicopter spin, absorbing a brutal hit but getting the first down. It ignited the Broncos to a 31-24 victory. Finally, after 3 Super Bowl losses, Elway had his ring. Most would have retired right there, but Elway came back for one more season in 1998. And at 38, he definitely took a step back, but he was still serviceable, throwing for 2,806 yards with 22 touchdowns and posting a career-best 93 passer rating. The Broncos started 13-0 before resting their starters, finishing 14-2. In the Super Bowl against the Falcons, Elway threw for 336 yards with 2 total touchdowns. He won MVP honors as Denver dominated 34-19, becoming back-to-back champions. John Elway walked away at the absolute pinnacle, the way legends should go. 2 rings, Super Bowl MVP, riding off into the sunset as a champion. But not all legends get to do that, and that's proven with Calvin Johnson. Retiring at age 30, still in his prime, he had just gotten to his 6th Pro Bowl. His peak from 2010 to 2015 was special, with 3 first-team All-Pro selections in a row and a second team in there as well, setting the single-season receiving yards record in 2012 with 1,964. But the organization would be the major reason this legend would leave early. In his final season in 2015, Calvin Johnson was still elite. At 30 years old, he caught 88 passes for 1,214 yards and 9 TDs, his 6th consecutive 1,000-yard season. By every measure, Megatron was still one of the best receivers in football, but his body was breaking down. A nagging ankle injury plagued him the final 8 weeks of the season. Johnson later revealed he actually wanted to retire after 2014, but his father convinced him to give it one more year. The losing wore on him too. In 9 seasons with Detroit, the Lions had 7 losing records. They made the playoffs just twice, losing in the first round both times. Johnson was part of the infamous 0-16 season in 2008. Despite having elite talent, Johnson, Matthew Stafford, and Ndamukong Suh, they never had a winning culture. And on January 6, 2016, Johnson filed his retirement papers. But the real gut punch came after. The Lions forced him to pay back $1.6 million of his signing bonus. That was the reason for the rift between him and the Lions at the time. The Lions would later reconcile and are on good terms with him now, along with Megatron making the Hall of Fame. So it didn't all end too bad, but it definitely was surprising at the time. Speaking of surprises, we have to mention one of the most shocking retirements of all time in Andrew Luck. Luck was the most hyped prospect since Peyton Manning, and he actually lived up to every expectation. He walked into the Colts organization and dragged them to an 11-5 record his rookie year and a playoff berth, making the playoffs in each of his first 3 seasons and all the way to a conference championship against the Patriots in 2014. Getting blown out in that game, but still, Luck was the only reason they were there. Ryan Grigson had no idea what he was doing as a GM. And much like Luke Kuechly, injuries became a problem shortly after that. In week 3 of 2015, Luck suffered a shoulder injury that derailed everything. He'd missed 26 games over the next few seasons due to shoulder, kidney, and rib injuries. The worst part? He missed the entire 2017 season, questioning if he should even continue his career. But 2018 looked like redemption. Luck returned and won NFL Comeback Player of the Year, throwing for 4,593 yards and 39 touchdowns. He led the Colts back to the playoffs for the first time since 2014, and the future looked bright again. Then 2019 spring arrived with calf strain. Luck missed all off-season activities, minicamp, and took part in only 3 days of the training camp. The calf led to a high ankle sprain, and Luck got tired of rehabbing. On August 24, 2019, after the Colts' 3rd preseason game, Adam Schefter broke the news. Andrew Luck was retiring at just 29 years old. In an emotional press conference, Luck fought back tears. As he walked off the field that night, Colts fans booed him. The generational talent gone at 29. Fans have later come around and grown to appreciate Luck, especially after their carousel of QBs since him. And now Phillip Rivers is back for some reason. Another player who never played again due to injuries was Bo Jackson. If you watch any of my previous videos, you probably know I think Bo Jackson is one of the most overrated players in NFL history. That being said, I do get why people find him exciting. Bo Jackson was a dual sport athlete, playing both in the NFL and MLB. After refusing to play for the Bucs in 1986, he took on a role with the Raiders in 1987. His best season was in 1989, where he ran for 950 yards and 4 TDs. In 1990, Bo Jackson rushed for 698 yards and 5 touchdowns in just 10 games. He averaged an incredible 5.6 yards per carry and was named to his first Pro Bowl, becoming the only player to be both an MLB All-Star and NFL Pro Bowler. On January 13, 1991, the Raiders faced the Bengals in an AFC divisional playoff game. Early in the 3rd quarter, Jackson took a handoff and burst through the line for 34 yards before being tackled. It seemed routine, but Bo had severely dislocated his hip. The injury caused a condition where blood flow to the bone is cut off, killing the tissue. At first, the Raiders thought it was minor. Bo thought he just suffered a hip pointer and told the reporters he'd play the next week. He never did. At just 28 years old, Bo Jackson's football career was over, and the legend of what could have been only grew larger from there. But someone who won't be fondly looked back on is Deshaun Watson. He hasn't technically retired, but he will never play another snap of football again. Deshaun Watson came onto the scene hot, off the back of an incredible college career at Clemson. His first Texans season was great. He threw for 1,699 yards and 19 touchdowns in just 6 starts. Then he would tear his ACL, ruining likely a Rookie of the Year nod. His next 3 years, he made the Pro Bowl in each, ultimately having his 2020 season be his best. 4,823 yards, leading the league with 33 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. Despite his excellence, the Texans went 4-12. Deshaun Watson would ultimately request a trade, then everything snapped. In March of 2021, the first lawsuit was filed. Then another, and another. Eventually, 24 women accused Watson of sexual assault and misconduct during massage sessions. 2 Texas grand juries declined to indict him criminally, but the damage was done. Watson sat out the entire 2021 season. Then, for some reason, the Browns traded for him anyway, giving him a record-breaking, fully guaranteed $230 million contract. The NFL suspended him 11 games and fined him $5 million for that 2022 season. His Browns tenure has been a disaster. In 2022, he posted a 79.1 passer rating in just 6 games. In 2023, he looked even worse and got a season-ending injury. Then in 2024, Watson was the worst quarterback in football through 7 games before tearing his Achilles in Week 7 against the Bengals. As he was carted off the field, Browns fans cheered. It was one of the most uncomfortable moments in NFL history. Then in February 2025, Watson re-injured the same Achilles during routine rehab. His career is effectively over. The Browns have already moved on, drafting Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, who's now their starter for the foreseeable future. Watson will go down as one of the biggest disasters in NFL history, and Browns fans, along with the rest of the NFL, will try to forget this moment in time for their franchise. Another big disaster was Aaron Hernandez, who somehow makes Deshaun Watson not look as bad, which is really hard to do. Aaron Hernandez was supposed to be the future. Drafted in the 4th round by the Patriots in 2010 out of Florida, he immediately became a weapon. As a rookie, he caught 45 passes for 563 yards and 6 touchdowns in just 7 starts. But it was his versatility that made him special. His 2011 season was even better. Hernandez finished with 79 catches for 910 yards and 7 touchdowns. Alongside Rob Gronkowski, they formed the most unstoppable 2 tight end set the league had ever seen. In 2012, the Patriots rewarded him with a 5-year, $40 million extension. At just 23 years old, he caught 51 passes for 483 yards and 5 touchdowns in 10 games. His future seemed limitless. Then on January 26, 2013, everything ended. Hernandez was arrested and charged with first degree. The Patriots released him within hours. He never played another snap. In 2015, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. In 2017, he was found KO'd in his cell. Aaron Hernandez's legacy isn't about football anymore. It's a tragedy of wasted talent and violence. And speaking of violence, we have Joe Theismann, but not because of violence he did, but violence against him. Joe Theismann was a former 4th round draft pick in 1971 by the Miami Dolphins, never playing for them, eventually finding his way to the Washington Redskins in 1974. He'd work his way from backup to starter to Super Bowl winning QB in 1982 and league MVP in 1983. An incredible story on all fronts, who only got better with age. After an 11-5 down year in 1984, they wanted to come back to Super Bowl form like years prior, but that didn't happen. At age 36, Joe looked old. Theismann had thrown just 8 touchdowns against 16 interceptions. There was talk he should be benched. And on November 18, 1985, the Redskins hosted the Giants on Monday Night Football. The score was tied 7-7 in the second quarter when coach Joe Gibbs called a flea flicker. As Theismann moved left, Lawrence Taylor came from behind and dragged him down, falling directly on his right leg. Taylor immediately waved frantically for help. Players said they heard a crack. As Theismann was carted off, the RFK Stadium crowd gave him a standing ovation. Backup Jay Schroeder led the Washington to a 23-21 victory, but Theismann never played again. At 36, his career ended in one of the most gruesome injuries ever broadcast on live television. He's remembered fondly, and honestly has gotten some Hall of Fame push over the past few years as being the only NFL MVP and Super Bowl winner to not be in the Hall of Fame. For one NFC East player to another, we have Tiki Barber. Tiki Barber was the Giants' career rushing leader with 10,449 yards, a 3-time Pro Bowler and first-team All-Pro in 2005. He was one of the most dynamic running back of his era, but he had one glaring weakness: fumbles. From 1999 to 2004, Barber averaged 7.5 fumbles per season. At 31 years old, Barber rushed for 1,662 yards and had a total of 2,127 total scrimmage yards. He made his 3rd straight Pro Bowl. The Giants went 8-8 and made the playoffs as a wild card, but lost to the Eagles in the first round. Then Barber shocked everyone by retiring to pursue broadcasting with NBC. The very next season, the Giants won the Super Bowl, upsetting the undefeated Patriots. Barber wasn't there to celebrate. Instead, he criticized them. And when the Giants unveiled their Ring of Honor in 2010, fans booed him. Tiki Barber walked away 1 year too early, then burned every bridge on his way out. His legacy became one of bitterness instead of glory. And Giants fans still have mixed emotions about him to this day. Speaking of glory, we have Ray Lewis's 2012 Super Bowl run. Ray Lewis was the heart and soul of the Baltimore Ravens for 17 years, a 12-time Pro Bowler, 7-time first-team All-Pro, and 2-time Defensive Player of the Year winner. He won his first Super Bowl in 2000 and won Super Bowl MVP, anchoring one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. The 2012 was going to be different. Before the season, he had announced he was retiring after the upcoming year. Unfortunately, on October 14th against the Cowboys, Lewis tore his triceps, an injury nobody had ever come back from mid-season. Doctors told him it was over. Lewis refused to accept it though. On January 2nd, 2013, he announced this would be the final ride. The Ravens were the 4th seed, meaning if they won, every game would be on the road. Lewis returned for the wildcard game against the Colts, leading the defense through victories over Denver and New England. Then came the Super Bowl against the 49ers in New Orleans. The Ravens led 34-29 with under 2 minutes left. San Francisco had the ball at the 5-yard line, 4 chances to win it all. Lewis and the defense held strong, 3 straight incompletions and a 4th down fade that fell incomplete. Ray Lewis walked off the field the final time as a champion. 2 Super Bowl rings, retiring exactly how all players want, hoisting the Lombardi Trophy one last time. Everyone knew it was time for Ray to pack it up, but it was nice to see him go out with another ring on his finger. Sadly, that wouldn't happen with Drew Brees. It seemed as though for the first time since 2009, the Saints were putting it all together. Though at 41 years old, Drew Brees wasn't quite the same, the team was at its best. Drew Brees had spent 15 years in New Orleans after signing as a free agent in 2006. The same year, Hurricane Katrina devastated the city. Together, Brees and coach Sean Payton rebuilt both the franchise and the community. He led their team to their only Super Bowl in 2009, winning Super Bowl MVP. He retired as the NFL's all-time passing leader with 80,358 yards and completions with 7,142. In 2020, his final season, Brees was 41 years old. He threw for 2,942 yards and 24 touchdowns in 12 games. The Saints went 12-4 and earned the second seed, but injuries had taken their toll. 11 broken ribs and a punctured lung cost them 4 games. However, they were able to go 3-1 in those games he missed, seeming like everything was humming for him to end like Elway or Peyton. Not at their best, but good enough to get the job done. However, he came up against Brady. In the divisional round against Tom Brady and the Bucks, Brees struggled. He threw 3 interceptions in a 30-20 loss. What made it even more devastating was the setting. Due to COVID, the Superdome was limited to just 3,000 fans. As Brees walked off the field for the last time, he looked back at an empty stadium, the place that had been his home for 15 years. No farewell, no standing ovation, just silence. Drew Brees deserved a better ending than that, and so did Dan Marino. Dan Marino revolutionized the quarterback position. Drafted in 1983 alongside John Elway, Marino's quick release and gunslinger mentality changed the game forever. He made the Super Bowl in just his second season, throwing for a then record 5,084 yards and winning MVP. He finished his career as a 9-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro, and 1984 MVP. But he never won a ring. By 1999, Marino was 38 years old and clearly declining. He threw for 2,448 yards with 12 touchdowns and 17 interceptions, his worst season ever. The Dolphins went 9-7, but somehow made the playoffs as a wild card. In the divisional round, they faced the 14-2 Jacksonville Jags, and it was a massacre. Marino threw for just 95 yards with 2 interceptions and was sacked 4 times. The Jaguars dominated 62-7, the second worst playoff loss in NFL history. As Marino walked off the field, he knew it was over. He officially announced his retirement in March of 2000. One of the greatest quarterbacks ever, with every record imaginable at the time, ended his career getting blown out by 55 points. People were sad to see him go out like this. The organization failed him year after year, and Dan the Man earned a better ending than that. And so did Barry Sanders, though he ended it on his own terms. Barry Sanders was one of the most electrifying running backs the NFL had ever seen. Drafted 3rd overall by the Lions in 1989, he won Offensive Rookie of the Year immediately. Over the next decade, Sanders made 10 straight Pro Bowls, earned 6 first-team All-Pro selections, and 1997 NFL MVP after rushing for 2,053 yards, just the 3rd player to ever break 2,000 at the time. His 1998 season was still elite. At 30 years old, Sanders rushed for 1,491 yards and 4 touchdowns in 16 games. He was just 1,457 yards away from breaking Walter Payton's all-time rushing record. Everyone expected him to come back and claim the crown. Instead, on July 27, 1999, Sanders faxed his retirement letter to his hometown newspaper. He was 31 years old, still in his prime, and the Lions were furious. They tried to force him to repay $7.3 million of his signing bonus. Barry Sanders walked away from greatness, leaving fans wondering what could have been without their franchise guy who was still at his peak. And they wouldn't fully recover until getting Stafford and Megatron in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And lastly, the person who went out on their own terms with having probably the worst season and still winning a Super Bowl is Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. 5 MVPs, 14 Pro Bowls, 2 Super Bowl rings. He spent 14 legendary seasons with the Colts before a neck injury that required 4 surgeries forced him out in 2011. But Manning signed with Denver in 2012 and had a renaissance. In 2013, he threw for 5,477 yards and an NFL record 55 touchdowns, winning his 5th MVP at 37 years old. He made another Super Bowl but lost to Seattle in a blowout. By 2015, Manning was 39 and awful. He threw for 9 touchdowns against 17 interceptions through 9 games. His body was breaking down. A torn plantar fascia in his foot sidelined him. Coach Gary Kubiak benched him for Brock Osweiler. But for the playoffs, Manning returned. In the divisional round against Pittsburgh, he managed 222 yards and didn't turn it over. Then came the AFC Championship game against Tom Brady and the Patriots. Manning threw for only 176 yards and 2 TDs, but it was Denver's defense that would dominate in a 20-18 victory. Super Bowl 50 against Carolina was ugly. Manning completed just 13 passes for 141 yards with an interception, but Von Miller and the Broncos defense carried them to a 24-10 win. Peyton Manning retired 2 months later, a champion. He went out on top like Elway did before him. And with him ending his career with 2 Super Bowl rings, it promptly put him back in the potential GOAT argument again, before Tom Brady would snatch that for good. Thanks for watching. Click on the video up top next if you like the content, and subscribe if you're new. See you soon.